In the movie Robert, a housekeeper is fired and gifts a young boy a haunted doll in order to bring misfortune to the family. The result is 90 minutes of forced tension with little bits of interesting sprinkled in here and there. In this video, we will look at the mistakes the characters make, figure out potential alternatives, and attempt to beat Robert the doll. Robert the Doll is a true story and is based on a story that dates back to the early 1900s. And fun fact, Robert is actually the inspiration for the famous franchise Chucky. In 2015, filmmaker Andrew Jones started a Robert franchise which has since spanned 3 sequels: The Curse of Robert the Doll, 2016, Robert and the Toy Maker, 2017, The Revenge of Robert the Doll, 2018, and the first one, just regular old Robert, 2015. That we will be reviewing today. Right off the bat, we meet an American couple. The wife is obviously troubled, and the husband is taking care of her. They have about 1 million candles for maximum spooky effect. It's a fire hazard, but they're heads and don't care. The housekeeper comes in. They tell her the house is haunted, and she says it's not the house, it's the doll. We see Robert for the first time, and it's pretty horrifying. I mean, imagine waking up and seeing that 2 inches from your face. We then jump to 3 years later, and the housekeeper now works for British couple Paul and Jenny, who have a middle school-aged son named Gene. The housekeeper comes in, asking where the dustpan is. Jenny is obviously bothered by this, and after the housekeeper leaves, she asks her husband if he'll fire her, because she's been becoming more and more forgetful. Honestly, it doesn't seem like a good reason to fire her, and the whole movie could have been avoided if they'd just given the old woman a bit of leeway. But anyways, husband says he's late and needs to be focused for court today, and leaves. Jenny then goes and talks to the housekeeper, and this is where things really start to go downhill. Agatha, the housekeeper, goes up into the attic and opens a box to reveal Robert. Movie doesn't reveal if Agatha lives on the property with the family or if she's just carrying around Robert wherever she goes for the hell of it. It's also possible that this is the same house that the American couple lived in, but no real clarification is given. At the end of the day, Paul comes home and talks to Jenny, who says that firing Agatha triggered her anxiety. He gives a half-hearted apology and then says he'll make her dinner. Surprise, surprise. They're having marital problems. Because it's a horror movie. How freaking original. It's here we learn that Jenny has a mental illness and is heavily medicated. This sets the stage for Paul to discredit her future warnings about the doll. Before Agatha leaves for good, she visits Gene and gives him the doll as a gift. She says that the doll will always protect from harm and be his best friend forever. Gene protests because it's a doll, but ends up taking it. He says that Robert is funny looking, which is an understatement, and she reprimands him. He must always be nice to Robert and never be rude to him because Robert won't like it. Oh, and also, take Robert with him wherever he goes because that's a totally normal warning to say to someone when giving them a gift. Honestly, it's weird that she does this because isn't she violating her own relationship with the doll? Isn't she worried that giving Robert away will end up badly for her? This is the second instance where all the events of the movie could have been avoided if the kid had refused to take Robert. The maid would have had to take the doll back home, and that would have been the end of that. Of course he doesn't, and she doesn't, and they're all going to die. On Agatha's way out, Jenny says she's sorry for canning her, and Agatha replies, "You will be." If Jenny had skipped the apology and just said, "This is stupid, I overreacted, we'd love to have you to stay," the ending might have been different. Bam, movie over. Jenny comes in and sees the doll and asking where it came from. Gene says it was a gift from Agatha and asks why she had to leave. He says that Robert said that the mother was always mean to Agatha. For whatever reason, this raises no red flags for the kid or the mother. The kid's a little annoying, but doesn't seem like a pathological liar or a particularly weird kid. Why aren't they freaking out about this? Why so calm? She decides she's going to take it up to the attic. Gene is upset by this and says that he doesn't want her to take it. If I were the mom, I'd be giving the doll back to Agatha. I mean, did you see how it looks? Was her ominous, "You'll be sorry," not indicative of ill will and malice? Paul comes home and sees Robert and is put off by this. Gene again says that Robert talks to him, and Paul has a normal reaction and seems freaked out by this, but not for the right reasons. He's only upset because his son has a doll. Paul goes downstairs and argues with Jenny, and she calls him a testosterone knucklehead, an absolute whiz-banger of an insult. Paul comments on how Jean said the doll talked to him, and Jenny gets upset because she thinks it's a crack at her mental illness, saying that she heard voices before the medication. He says it's not, but you can tell. He's worried the kid will turn out like his mother. At night, Jenny hears a noise and goes downstairs. There's the sound of little feet moving, something like an obese mouse, and she wanders into the kitchen. The jar of sugar is knocked over, and toddler-sized footprints are clearly visible. She starts cleaning it up, and a small figure runs past in the shadows behind her. She checks Gene's room, thinking it's him, and sees that he's fast asleep. Once she leaves, we see the little sugar granules on the bottom of Robert's shoes. The next morning, Jenny asks why Gene knocked the sugar over, and he says he didn't do it. Gene says it was Robert, and that Robert doesn't like him to go with him when he's exploring. This is another warning sign that the mother just kind of ignores. Again, there's no indication that Gene would lie about something like this. Why would he? It's a stupid thing to lie about. And even if they didn't think he was lying, why didn't their thoughts go to sleepwalking or something like that? I mean, the kid starts acting weird and talking to the doll and saying he's talking to the doll, and the parents act like it's no big deal. Did he talk to his other toys before? Like, they know the mother has a mental illness and they're not screening the son for it? The kid starts saying whack and no one is bothered by it? Tropey horror movie parents are the tropiest. Night. Jenny paints in her studio and accidentally knocks over her water. She leaves to get paper towels, and when she comes back, red paint has been thrown over the painting, and there's the little red paint footprints leading upstairs. Jenny goes up and yells at Gene, who is clearly asleep, saying she saw the footprints. Gene blames Robert. Paul comes in and says that they should all go to bed and deal with it tomorrow, and Jenny is super pissed. This is the second time Jenny's seen the small footprints and assumed it was a human. Jenny doesn't know her own son's shoe size, and I find that hard to believe. Jenny's been shown to be pretty self-aware in spite of her illness, but something like a shoe size confuses her? These people are so stupid they might deserve to die. Cut away, and we see red paint on the bottom of Robert's shoes. Mom, Jenny, stands outside of Gene's room and hears voices. Like plural, as in more than one, and still isn't concerned. She asks who Gene's talking to, and Gene says he's been talking to Robert. She apologizes for snapping and breezes by the fact that her previously normal son is talking to an obviously haunted doll. Agatha's replacement shows up and introduces herself to Paul. She says she interviewed with Jennifer for the housekeeper position, and Paul just believes her without any sort of verification of identity, because it's always a good idea to let random strangers in your house for no damn reason. Everyone leaves. Perhaps this is why Robert's so angry, because Gene didn't take him to school with him. Martha goes upstairs to clean the bathrooms. She passes by Gene's room and insults Robert to his clearly demon-infested face. She scrubs the counters, turns her direction to the sink, and turns back to see Robert right next to her. Not gonna lie, I jumped a little bit. This movie is cheesy, but sort of in a wonderful way. It doesn't go over the top with jump scares like the big blockbusters do, but it's got these terrifying little moments that work only because they're so underplayed. This is really the best part of the movie. The cleaners just seen the doll inexplicitly move in a way that defies physics, and instead of, I don't know, apologizing to it or running the out of there and never coming back, she picks it up and puts it back. The door opens on its own, which is really the only time something moves without Robert directly touching it, and doesn't really make sense. But let's just ignore that wide open plot hole and move on. Martha is pushed down the stairs. Robert looks through the cutout on the stairs, and Martha looks pretty much dead. This is the first time there's actually a reason for Robert to attack, and the movie isn't consistent with this for the remainder of the runtime. This is annoying because it means we have an unreliable narrator, and the movie doesn't define the clear rules of the world and Robert's abilities and motivations, which would have been more fun to explore and theorize about ways which he could have been beaten. Jenny comes back and finds Martha on the floor, who tells her that it was the doll who pushed her. Jenny calls 911. Jenny cries to Paul and says that there is so much blood, and honestly, I've seen more blood in a single paper cut. Dumbass husband proposes going out for the night to have a nice meal because he's a dumbass, and not at all worried about the lawsuit and insurance claims their new maid is going to throw at them, even though he is literally a dumb-ass lawyer. Again, get rid of the doll. Wife, Jenny, is looking for her lipstick. Paul tells her to hurry because the babysitter's already there. He leaves, and Jenny goes into the bathroom. In a ripoff of The Shining, the word die is written in red lipstick on her mirror. I expected a lot of things from this movie, but Robert having decent handwriting was not one of them. She freaks out, understandably so, and nearly passes out over the railing. The door to Jean's room is open, and she walks in, seeing Robert holding the lipstick. Jean comes in, and Jenny asks if he was playing with her lipstick or if he wrote something on the mirror. Jean denies both. She then asks if Jean wants to put Robert into the attic. He says no, that the doll wouldn't like it, and that he, Jean, wouldn't do that if he were her. Robert's not always mean, and he's usually making him, Jean, laugh. Horror movies only exist because the people in them are incredibly stupid. Anyone in real life would have just gotten rid of the doll at this point. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that the doll is the problem, since the issues didn't start until Agatha gave Jean the doll. Jean tells Paul to follow her upstairs, but the writing is gone from the mirror, which means Robert, the spirit-haunted doll, cleaned up his own haunting. Robert is the worst at this haunting thing. Instead of believing his wife, Paul blames stress and mental illness for Jenny's imagining the whole thing. This gets me pissed off. I hate when horror films use mentally ill protagonists as an excuse for weird to happen. And honestly, Jenny has been a pretty okay character so far. She's aware of her mental illness, she's a good mother, and is working on communication with her husband and taking all her medications. She has a job that she both loves and is pretty good at, and the movie infers that she's done better in the past and been able to sell more when she has more time. Movie is a to Jenny and to people with schizophrenia, and I won't stand for it. You movie. Marcus puts Jean to bed. He asks her to leave the light on. She doesn't ask why and calmly leaves. Driving to the restaurant, Jenny mentions the fact that Martha was pushed down the stairs and the lipstick. Paul makes a dickish comment about her mental illness again. She talks about the time she fought to get a diagnosis and his past behaviors of not believing her when she needed him to. Why is it that all men think that cheating is the only way to betray a woman's trust? Clap back, sis. Clap back. They come back and Marcy isn't there. They freak out and run upstairs, waking up Jean, who apparently didn't hear Marcy getting murdered. Oh, come on. That's not a spoiler. Marcy was obviously gonna die. Jenny calls Marcy's mother to yell at her. Paul sits on the couch and sees a tear in the fabric with cotton stitching out. A police officer answers and says that Marcy's dead. We then get a little flashback of Robert chasing Marcy, and it's amazing. And I loved every little second of it. Run, Marcy, run! Paul is a jerk for the millionth time, and Jenny slaps him and runs up the stairs. I would have punched him, but to each their own. Jenny asks Jean to tell her the truth about Robert. He tells her that Robert wants to be best friends forever and ever. She asks if he has ever said anything nasty. Jean says he doesn't want to say, but eventually reveals that Robert doesn't like his parents because Jenny and Paul don't like him, so he doesn't like them either. Then Jean, totally bothered, calmly states that Robert told him he pushed Martha down the stairs. She asks if he told her what happened to Marcy. Jean says that Marcy, babysitter, made him mad. Jenny takes the doll and says that Jean doesn't have to be afraid of it anymore. She starts screaming at the doll. Paul says that her behavior isn't normal and that maybe they should talk to the doctor to up her medication. Jenny says, you, Paul. As she should. Good for you, Jenny. Good for you. Paul is an asshole. She tells him she's gonna go to Agatha's house the following morning and ask her where she got the doll. Jenny puts Robert in the shed instead of the attic, like she's been threatening to do all along, which makes me think the movie didn't have the budget for an attic. If your horror movie doesn't have an attic, do you even have a horror movie? Next day, Paul looks in Jenny's studio and notices that her paintings have been getting progressively darker. Jenny is at Agatha's house. The door is locked and she bends down to pick the lock. A man comes up behind her and scares her. He knows Agatha because he lived next door to him for 25 years, but then says that Agatha died, maybe because she gave Robert away? The man asks why she's hanging around Agatha's house. Obviously, she can't tell him why she's really there, and she says that she loaned Agatha some important things and would really like to get them back. He agrees and unlocks the door. Jenny looks through the house for clues about Robert. She finds some files and pictures. Back at the house, Paul goes into the shed. Robert runs out of the shed all wibbly-wobbly like a toddler with a stolen iPhone or your drunk Uncle Fred on Christmas Day. Jenny finds information for the couple at the beginning who Agatha used to work for. She tracks down their house and tells them Agatha died. Paul asks if Jean let Robert out of the shed. He says no, and Paul tells him that Mom put the doll in the shed, and Jean is immediately afraid because he knows Robert is going to be mad. Jenny pushes the couple for information and tells him about the doll. As soon as she says the doll's name, the husband freaks out and tells her to be quiet, blaming his wife and saying that she is unwell, that Robert is the reason the wife is sick. Wife comes out and says that they have to get rid of the doll because the evil can be contagious. Jean tells his dad he's leaving for bed and says goodbye instead of goodnight. Paul comments and says that people usually say goodnight before bed. Jean walks away looking ominous as and Paul's like, totally normal and not at all foreboding, and continues on his merry way. The woman tells Jenny the whole backstory, that dolls look innocent, so many evil spirits use them as a host so that they're not detected. Clearly, this woman doesn't remember what Robert looks like because he's fugly as heck. The woman says she hired a psychic to learn more about the doll after her illness. The doll was owned by Robert Crow, who was found dead in the river, clutching the doll. The boy was murdered by his father, and the young boy's spirit possessed the doll. The doll went to Robert's cousin, who named the doll after him. The doll started causing some problems, and he was put in the attic for many years, and the spirit lay dormant. Agatha eventually moved into the cousin's house years later. The psychic said that she was a troubled soul and had experimented with the dark arts, giving the doll the energy it needed to remanifest itself. Jenny says that she locked the doll in a shed, and the woman says that's not enough, pleading with her to do whatever it takes to destroy it. Robert hits Paul in the back of the head with a bat, and it's a homer for Robert. Paul goes down like a but he was a douche, so we don't care. Jenny returns, sees Paul on the floor, and starts crying. She doesn't check his pulse or anything and leaves him for dead as she heads upstairs and starts banging on Jean's door, begging him to open it. She then stands there for a stupid long time without looking behind her, which is something you only do if you're in a horror movie. Because, as we've already assessed, it is movie law that everyone in a horror movie must be a massive idiot. Jenny doesn't turn around until Robert's a few feet away, holding the bat, and ready to raise his batting average with a second home run. Only, surprise, Paul isn't dead. He crawls out of nowhere and stabs Robert in a Paul Ex Machina, which puts the doll down for some reason. They hug Jean, relieved, and Jean does some great eyeball acting, staring at Robert, utterly terrified. Or disappointed. I don't know. Unclear. 3 weeks later. Nothing is said about Robert, but Paul says that things will be different from now on. Don't know what that means, but the movie's almost over, so let's just move on. He goes upstairs to take a bath and spends 10 minutes mixing the bubbles and pretending he's a pretty princess. Jenny refills her paint wash water in the kitchen. She notices a knife is gone. Paul is still playing with his damn bubbles, leaves the door open like a pervert. There's a pansy-ass scream, and Jenny runs to the stairs. There's a knife dripping in blood, only it's not Robert, it's Jean. So that's fun. Robert was rough around the edges, but he did have some great comments on mental illness. Definitely more than I expected from a 3.1 IMDb rated movie. Should we review the rest of the Robert movies and see what other carnage this 2-foot terror gets into? How would you have beaten Robert? What did we miss? Leave your suggestions in the comments for the kind of movie villains you'd like to see us beat here at Bingexpress. Let me know. And as always, take care of yourselves. I'll see you again next week, and peace out. Binge another one.